Mirror, mirror on the wall, why didn't I review a Christmas movie at all? The reason for your lack of festive film reviews is because you usually spend most of the Christmas holiday at a bar, with me propped up on a nail tap as you drink a fuck ton's worth of alcohol, whilst reminding me that I'm the best drinking partner you've ever had. To be fair, the Mirror has a point, but that's not the only reason I avoid any Santa Christ related material. Aside from the fact it makes my foreskin crawl, I feel that they're way too divorced from actuality. The probability of a masked psychopath being all stabby rip stab stab on Halloween night is far more likely to occur than your average human being achieving genuine happiness on Christmas Day. Then again, on reflection, it's probably much easier to be murdered on Christmas Day than it is to achieve said happiness for the occasion, but I digress. 40 years after the Haddonfield killings, Michael Myers is back after escaping an insane asylum and returns home to finish the job he started in the late 70s. But this time, Laurie is practically laying down a red carpet for him, as she has spent the last 4 decades training herself in a variety of firearms so vast that she makes Deadshot look like he works for the CSGV. Despite being the 11th installment under the Halloween banner, this is the direct sequel to the original, resulting in what is known in the fictional world as retroactive continuity, or retcon for short. Basically, fuck the films that happened in between these two movies, they might as well not exist. Fine by me, that means I don't have to rewatch or even remember over 14 hours of ruthless inconsistency, and instead use the time doing something more constructive like eating barbecue sauce directly from the sachet whilst working out the combined runtime of 9 Halloween movies. At this point, I would love nothing more than to tell you that it was alright. Which it is. Then end the review right there before heading down to my local tavern with my favourite drinking partner ever for a spot of whiskey and tears. But over the years I've noticed that when those 4 words are used to summarise an entire experience of, well, anything to be honest, 9 times out of 10 they're usually way too vague to be close to reality. I myself am not entirely innocent of this misdemeanour because many times in the past I've used those words to describe 2 extremely opposite occasions. For example, one was a delightful rarity when I get to be surrounded by loved ones for a day of laughter, smiles, excitement, happiness, merriment and all other synonyms. The other was a day out at the alternative zoo. It was alright, but the cages were the wrong shade of grey. It depressed me. Practically all of the movies you'll ever see, especially at the cinema, adhere to the 3-act structure, and Halloween is no different. However, the ones belonging to this film were so separate from one another it feels like each act belongs in a different movie. Halloween was written by 3 people, whom of which gave me the impression that they fucked off the idea of collaboration, picked their respective sections of the movie to write a script for out of a hat before promptly travelling to separate locations in the name of sealing themselves off completely from each other during the entire writing process, and finally gathering back in the same room for the first time since the Sorting Hat to staple their work together and send it to whatever twat has to deal with it next, all whilst not uttering any form of communication whatsoever. The first act focuses on the generational trauma Laurie's paranoia of the boogeyman returning has caused her daughter and granddaughter, as well as the psyche of Michael Myers in the name of discovering a motive for his previous work. It didn't really go beyond the surface of his mind, and any progress towards anything perceived as interesting was abolished by a recording of Dr. Loomis saying that Michael is pure evil that should be destroyed, followed by Laurie concluding that he is simply a big, strong shithouse that loves killing people, which is fine. I can see why a victim of multiple unprovoked attempted murders would feel that way, but it could have avoided undermining the entire first act by exploring the issue further than our protagonist dropping bottom lines despite Stone Cold not saying so. The middle act is my personal favourite of the 3 because it's the section of the movie that depicts the aura of the original Halloween the most. Myers is finally unleashed and literally going door to motherfucking door and killing the occupants. No one is fucking safe. He is slaughtering police, doctors, children, babysitters, high school kids, as well as teenagers like nature intended. The kills themselves are nothing particularly special and have been done better elsewhere recently. The whole movie, but this act in particular, delivered unintentional hilarity. Many a moment occurred when I find myself chuckling over parts that were meant to be taken seriously. However, there was one particular event when a character goes through pivotal development that was clearly meant to be earnest or at the very least provide a cheap jump scare. Neither of which happened because me and everyone else in my screening were way too fucking busy laughing to give the movie the credentials it clearly craves. It also baffled me that despite being deeply into his golden years, Michael still somehow possesses the strength of a forklift truck on steroids, quicker legs than the Flash on cocaine, and can take more bullets than your average gangster rapper, but I digress once again. The final act didn't feel like a Halloween movie at all. It emitted the type of atmosphere that usually belongs to a Terminator film, i.e. a female trained in weapons / hand-to-hand combat is trying to save herself and her relatives from the seamlessly unstoppable killing machine currently stalking them. You could argue that's a loose resemblance, but during this act, Michael and the Terminator share very similar traits, not to mention the cinematography altered its style to solidify this comparison. I liked the fact that a fair amount of the showdown between the 3 generations of Strode women and Michael was filmed from the perspective of the latter. It was a refreshing change of pace that unfortunately didn't feel right. When you are latched onto the viewpoint of the prey, you feel like you're being hunted. A wave of anxiety covers you, thus creating tension. When you are looking through the eyes of the hunter, you feel safe, secure, and borderline invincible at times, which isn't the ambience a horror movie should be going for. The efforts made at attempting to restore suspense after this were admirable, but in vain, because the scene that could have potentially resurrected said suspense was overall an atrocious fail. If you're going to rely on jump scares to create atmosphere, the execution has to be perfect. Let me explain. This represents the apprehension that the movie is striving for. The bottom part of the graph serves as the moment where the jump scare takes place, and the line in the middle shows the level of said jump scare's effectiveness. As the apprehension is building up via music and on-screen suspense, it would be foolish for the movie to blow its load before the foreplay has even begun. Ideally, when the audio and visual tension has reached their collective peak, should you implement your jump scare, or just before, perhaps slightly after, just to throw the audience off. Halloween left it way too fucking late. By the time Michael decided to turn up super belated to the jump scare, any apprehension that was built up past its peak descended into boredom, transformed into complete disinterest, and finally disappeared into a pit of obsolescence to spend the rest of eternity with the Toasty Maker and Stan Lee's blank storyboard pads. Despite these three acts meeting the traditional setup, conflict and resolution criteria, they only seem to work individually. Each premise, tone and structure are so divergent from each other that stringing them together made the whole movie feel so jolted and uneven. There was no fluidity, and the smoothness of transition between the acts I feel are being portrayed perfectly by the visuals in front of you. Oh, and because modern day movie culture, yes, there is a post-credits. I was about to say scene, but that wouldn't be entirely accurate because it was just a blank screen accompanied by the sound of Michael breathing in his mask like we heard earlier on in the film. There's some speculation floating around the internet regarding who the breasts belong to, but come the fuck on, who else is it going to be? For starters, talks of another installment already exist. Not to mention there's only one person alive who is capable of killing the boogeyman, and he wasn't in this movie, which is probably for the best because it would have been much fucking shorter. What concerns me the most about this film is that it's the best Halloween sequel possible considering the factors involved. Jamie Lee Curtis and Nick Castle reprised their roles as Strode and Myers. John Carpenter returned to do the score. The writing team, despite my critique, collectively have a solid resume, and Blumhouse, who are at time of recording one of, if not the leading film companies producing horror movies. So on paper, Halloween should have been an epic contribution to its genre, but instead only managed to unlock the "it was alright" achievement, which in retrospect is open up for more interpretation than a smile belonging to a politician.